So it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Nik Peachey. Nik is Director of Pedagogy at Peachey Publications, an independent digital publishing company that specialises in the design of digital learning materials. He's been involved in education since 1990 and has more than 20 years of experience of working specifically with online and blended learning environments. He's worked all over the world training teachers and developing innovative and creative products, and is a two-time British Council Innovations Award winner. So over to you, Nik.
Hi, thank you. I'll just turn on my camera and hopefully you can see me. Hi, good afternoon, evening, morning, good night, depending on where you are. Good to see so many people here. I'm just going to start screen sharing. Hopefully you can see me still. And I'll just move my panel down to the bottom so that I can see you. And the chat has disappeared. Let's find the chat box. Okay, great. That looks like I'm just about set up and ready to go. Can you hear me okay? Can you type a yes if you can hear okay into the chat, just to check that you're all with me? Yeah, that's great. Perfect. Great. Thanks very much. Okay, got a bit of a dry throat today, so hopefully my voice will hold out through this. Okay, so this session is on building rapport in the remote classroom, which I think is sort of something that's very important, and probably as most of us do. Just a quick introduction. If you want to find out more about me, you can sort of follow the links to my different social media. When you get a copy of the presentation, you will be able to scan a QR code for the copy of this presentation if you want it at the end. But and this kind of talk that I'll be doing today is based on my experience of working in 100% online school, which I did as head of learning for a couple of years. I was responsible for developing a team of 70 teachers who were all based around the world and teaching students in different parts of the world. And what I want to share with you is sort of some of the insights that I gained from that, and some of the key points and the things that we did to sort of make that all run much more smoothly. The first thing that I'll share with you is this infographic, which I'll share a link to it with you through the chat as well if you want a copy, if you want to check it out. And basically, you know, this came as a result of the kind of research that I did into sort of what teachers needed when they made the change from being a classroom teacher to being an online teacher. And I sort of, and this was what I based the training around that I gave to teachers at the time. And I found that there were sort of 6 main things, and these are the 6 main things. You can check these out in more detail if you want to on the infographic or when you get the presentation later. But you know, one of the key things, you know, that we needed to help teachers was to understand their environment, their teaching environment, and by that I mean this kind of environment, the room that they're working on, and how that impacted on students and their learning, because a lot of teachers just sort of weren't aware of some of the things that they needed to be careful about when they first started teaching. One of the other aspects, I guess, of course, is the technical aspect, and there's some information here if you want to follow that up on, you know, some of the technical things that teachers need to learn how to do before they start teaching online. And the one that I'll be looking at most today is the interpersonal one. You know, most of us as teachers are very good at building relationships with our students in the physical classroom, but, you know, building relationships in the remote classroom, as many of you may have found, is a little more challenging. And there are sort of some tips and advice and things that you need to get used to if you want to do that. Of course, the other aspect of it was pedagogical. Oh, and my presentation's just disappeared. Yeah, and let's get back to my slide. Pedagogical, and of course there are some pedagogical changes as well, and things that we need to be aware of when we're making the change to online teaching. Things related to student behavior as well, things like codes of conduct, and making sure teachers have codes of conduct as well, and some sort of impacts on motivation. So those for me were the 6 main areas that we looked at. The one that I'll be focusing on this talk is the interpersonal one, and how to build that one. I'm often asked, because I'm involved deeply in educational technology, what's the killer app? What's the great app that we need to help us teach online? And I think the key killer app, it really is this webcam, getting used to finding out and how to use the webcam is really the key to sort of teaching well online. And that's what we'll be looking at today. In terms of engagement, here's a quick look at a teacher, and the question is well, how engaging am I? When we look at this picture, this is a typical teacher looking down at the screen, working their way through their presentation during an online remote lesson. And really, that's not that great. And I found that a lot of teachers, when they first start, they are like this, and they don't have that awareness of the camera and the fact that students are seeing them. Students also tend to be a bit like this as well. And so what we need to do is make the change from being like this to being a little bit more like this guy here. He's a little bit better. He could be smiling a bit more and look a bit more friendly, but for me, that's the key. One of the keys. You need to make that shift from being this person sitting at your laptop, staring at the screen with the camera pointing at the roof, to sort of getting up. In my case, I like standing up while I do this. I'm moving around a bit and being a bit more dynamic. So, I just want to look at a few key things that can help us to do that. And one of the important things, I think, is, making sure that you have your webcam, it's at eye level. I have mine here, I'm looking straight at my webcam now, so I can look directly at it. So that's one thing that I do. If you're using a laptop, it can make life very difficult for you. What happens is you end up with this kind of effect. So you've got your laptop there, the screen's pushed back, the camera's looking up at you, and what it's catching is just the top of your head, maybe looking up your nose, and some of the ceiling behind you. And that's not a great way to try and engage with your students. And one key tip really is to get a riser for your laptop. That's the little blue thing that's under here. These are very easy to and very cheap to get. I've got one lying on the floor somewhere, but you just put them underneath your laptop, and it pushes the laptop up so that then you can have the screen up so that the screen is parallel to your body. And what this will do is it will stop the distortion of the shape of your body, and also give you much more space to work with. One of the key things about working with the webcam is our distance from it and how much of us it sees. So we want the webcam to be able to see our hands so we can work with our body movements. So just having that simple riser can help you a lot. Other things, making eye contact. Don't be in the classroom reading your lesson plan. Try to make eye contact, and that means looking at the actual camera and not at the screen. Lots of us, if you're using Zoom and you see yourself on the camera, you tend to look down at yourself. But what you need to do is look up at the webcam. And to do this, what I do is I have a little tip here. If you're using Zoom, the monitor that shows you your video camera and shows you what students can see usually appears at the bottom of the screen, but you can drag it around, and if you drag it up to the top of the screen, then you naturally make better eye contact. So drag it up to the top of the screen so that it's underneath the webcam, and that will help a lot. I'll show you the difference actually. I'll drag mine down to the bottom of the screen. So this is with my monitor at the bottom of the screen, and now I'm looking at myself while I'm talking, monitoring my body language, but I'm not looking at you. Now if I drag it up to the top of the screen, okay, I can still monitor myself, see myself talking, but it looks more like I'm talking to you. Really, I'm just talking to myself, but it looks like I'm talking to you, and it gives the effects of eye contact. And actually, some recent research proves that one of the reasons why online and remote teaching is so tiring is because we struggle with the lack of eye contact. We're not picking up our usual sort of non-linguistic communication messages. So that's a good tip. to help with students, and one that you can pass on to students as well. Another important thing I think of is to move back from the camera. Often people are far too close to their camera. They're in here or in here. If you get headphones with a decent long cord, or I use actually cordless ones, remote ones, you can actually move back quite a bit, and then you can start to play with that space quite a lot. As you probably see, I teach standing up as well. I have my laptop way up high on my desk, so I can actually do my teaching standing up. This frees me to move around. I can play with the distance quite a lot. So that's, I think that's quite important and can really help. It helps you use that body language as well. So you can use your hands much more. I mean, as a teacher, I always used to be doing this thing about the past. So, I can point over my shoulder, I can show things, I can do my pronunciation and my connected speech on my hands, because I've got that distance from the camera, and I can stand back and move backwards and forwards. In the classroom, we naturally use the proximity between ourselves and our students as a means of classroom management. When we play a listening for our students and we want them to listen to a cassette, we'll go in a specific place. If we want to monitor our students, we come closer. If we want to tell our students off, we can come closer at all as well. And you can start using those things in the remote classroom as well. If you have this distance of about a meter between yourself and the camera, you can come in and tell students off and waggle your finger at them when you want to, or you can go back, or if you want them to do some talking and you want to keep out of the screen, you can step out of the screen as well. And that just gives your students some thinking time and gives them gets them away from that sort of feeling of being pressured and that you're looking over their shoulder the whole time. So think about how you can play with your position within the camera, and how you can move yourself about when you need to come closer or when you need to step back. You could even sink down a little bit if you want to. So play with that proximity and play with the body language. One of the other things that I think is important is to think about how you use your voice. I've been to so many remote conferences, virtual conferences, like using Zoom, where teachers who are used to having to project to a really big classroom full of noisy students are still using their outdoor voice. They're, hello, everybody, how are you? Well, this is, and if you're bellowing like that, to your students, to listen to that becomes very painful and unpleasant. So think about taking down the pitch of your voice and taking down the volume a lot. You have a microphone, students can hear you. You can even switch theirs off and mute them so that they're not deafening each other. So, use your voice. Think about how you use your voice. Think about how to use it more softly at different parts of the lesson. Think about when you want your students' attention. Think about when you want to give them instructions. Think about how you want to sound when you want to be supportive, or maybe you want to come in a bit closer and whisper something to them so that only they can hear you. But there are a lot of things, a lot of different ways that you can play with your voice and use your voice. You don't have to be projecting to the whole classroom, to the back of the classroom above 30 noisy students anymore. Play to the advantage that technology can give you. Something that I think is really important is the use of a headset. Make sure all of your students use a headset. I have little earpieces that go in here, and that students also, that students also wear them. If you have a microphone, I mean, I use a Bluetooth one so I can move around more and I don't have to risk pulling the cable out. But the quality of the sound in your classroom is very important, and it's really dependent on having people using their headsets. If students are using speakers on their laptop, or if you're using speakers on your laptop, that's going to have a negative impact on everybody's sound. The same with the microphone. Try not to use one that's built in, because it will start picking up noise, from the fan on your laptop. So try and use a separate microphone if you can. So that will help a little bit. I've got a quick question for you, and this is one that I ask quite a lot. How do your students feel about using the webcam? I'd like you to sort of input some, if you can, some suggestions. Just think about how do your students feel about using the webcam? You can share with your insights here by scanning the QR code here, and that will give you a link to a little questionnaire, or you can go to menti.com and put it in there. I'll just give you a couple of minutes. Try and scan the code and share things. They'll disappear very quickly in the chat. I'll give you a couple of minutes to answer that, then I'll show you the answers. Okay. No, this is the reactions that I got from some. Oh, it's done it again. Sorry. I've got a bit of an oversensitive mouse, so it's just gone back a bit. There you go. There we are. So these are some of the comments that I've got from teachers, and often students do seem to be very reluctant, especially as they get older, to use their webcam. And that's a shame, because as I said, for me, the webcam is really your killer app. It's your most important tool, and it's your most important means of communicating with your students. And I think what we need to do is we need to get them to turn them on, and we need to get them to use them properly, so that they're not just sitting looking at them. And this is should be part of our teaching. Using the webcam properly is part of their communication technique. If you want to teach someone to communicate in this kind of environment, then they need to use that. And that's something, that's going to be become more and more important. And as more and more students start working from home in their working life. So what I want to share with you in the second half of the presentation is just some ideas that you can use to help encourage your students to switch the webcam on. Okay, and I'll just share a few of these ideas. I mean, one easy thing that we can take from the classroom is to get them to do show and tell. Show and tell is something that lots of us do in the physical classroom, and it's something that requires the webcam. It requires you to be able to show something. So, what I do is I kind of demonstrate this first. I've got a little object here. Here's something that I'd like to show you. I could actually get them to ask me questions about it if they want to. But this is a little tuk-tuk. This was a gift that I got given. I was working in Pakistan. I was working with a group of teachers in Pakistan, and while I was there, I wasn't allowed to go out, and I really wanted to take a ride in one of these tuk-tuks. And I told my students that I wasn't allowed to go out. I was being escorted everywhere, and and at the end of the course, they bought me this little tuk-tuk. So that's as close as I got to riding on a tuk-tuk in Pakistan. I actually got to ride on one in India a few years later, so that made up for it. But having something nice that's personal to show to your students, it's an example of a speaking activity, and then you can get students into groups, and they can show each other things using their webcam. And again, it's one of those nice activities that requires the visual, and so it's a way of encouraging students to turn on the webcam and to use it in a positive way. Another game that I have that I like to play with students, and again, this requires the webcam, is called the magic object. And basically what I do is that, I have in my hands a magic object. So what do you think I have in my hands? You can type into the chat. What do you think I'm holding? Okay, lots of nice suggestions. Okay, I'll show you. Look, it's a magic object. Okay, it can become anything. So tell me what it is now. Okay, that's right, it's a razor. How about now? I don't really need this one very often. Okay, great. How about now? Great. Okay, so once you've mimed a few things for your students, then you choose one of your students and you pass the magic object to them through the camera. Okay, and you ask them to take it. Make sure you make them reach up and take it from you. And when they take it from you, then they have to mime something as well. They mime something and then they can pass it to the next student who guesses correctly. So you get students passing around this magic object and miming different things. And it's just a nice kind of warmer and a nice technique to get students using the webcam in a productive way, and they have a bit of fun with it, and it helps to relax them about using it as well. So that's a kind of nice activity you can try with your students. Another one, and again, it's a very important communication skill, is mirroring body language. You know, this is something we naturally do when we empathize with people. If you're talking to someone who feels empathy for you, or you want to build trust with someone, you start mirroring their body language. And so you can ask your students to do that as they watch you. So whenever you move, so try and do this now, try and keep copying my body language. So, you know, this body language is very important. Yeah, it's very important. And if you copy somebody's body language, they trust you more. They start to feel that you're empathizing with them, and you can get students to keep moving and copying your body language while you speak. And then you can get one of them to take over, put them in pairs, give them a teaching activity, tell them to sort of keep mirroring each other's body language. And it's a great way to sort of use the webcam in a productive way that builds positive communication skills as well. With younger learners, maybe with older learners as well, it's great to have a dress-up day. You know, I think if it's business students or older students, you could actually get them to wear nice clothes. And you know, it was one of the things that we noticed from, you know, that I noticed while I was managing the online school, is that, you know, the better teachers were the ones who actually dressed for the occasion. Okay, they weren't leaving their homes, you know, they were teaching from home, but they still put on their proper teaching clothes and they looked smart. You know, getting people to dress up and make an occasion of this, and you know, getting them to turn the webcam on. If it's younger learners, they could have something, you know, like the superheroes costumes here. You know, you could have theme days, different themes, you know, different themed clothes. Everybody wears red one day, or everyone dresses up as a pop star another day. It doesn't matter what, but you know, just making it fun to have the webcam on and to be able to see each other. Of course, if you do that, you've got to make sure that you're willing to dress up yourself. So, you know, I keep a few hats and disguises about just in case I need to do it too, you know. But I think, you know, that can make you using the webcam a lot more fun, you know, and make a lot less boring. And again, it makes them more willing to turn it on. One of the other things that a lot of students don't seem to realize is that, you know, our posture conveys attitude, you know. So while they're sitting at their webcam, they should be thinking about their posture. And when they're communicating through it, they should be thinking about what message they're giving off with their posture. And this is a sort of a way that you can sort of help to convey that. I mean, I have a group of images, and I sort of get students to think about, you know, what are the different postures? What are they saying? What is each one saying? What's it communicating to the person who's listening? And then we can sort of, you know, take it in turns to choose one and try and imitate it. But I think, you know, you can call out an attitude and get them to assume the attitude, you know. But you know, again, it uses the webcam, it uses it in a very visual way, and it uses it in a way that's linked to communication and good communication. So, you know, I think it's worth teaching students these things. And in fact, I think it's quite important to teach students these things. Oh, well, another thing that might be nice with students, particularly with young learners, is puppets. And there's a picture of my puppet there that it actually belongs to my daughter, that I borrow off her every now and again. You know, so if students are shy, you know, and they don't want to be seen on the screen, you could get them to use a puppet instead, and they can stand out of the screen and just use the puppet for talking. You know, or you can bring other characters into the class using puppets, just to make it a bit more more interesting and interactive for your students, you know, and make it a bit more fun. You can even sort of paint a little face on your finger, and if you put it close enough to the webcam, it looks like a little, you can have two little fingers talking to each other with different faces on. All you need is just a little pen or some finger puppets or something like that. You know, and these are things that you can get students to do as well, and it just makes the session a bit more fun. And again, it uses the webcam in a positive way that's going to sort of take some of the stress out of that and make it a bit less intimidating. I actually did a course a few years ago where I was teaching teachers to use the webcam, and it's amazing how shy some teachers can be about turning the webcam on, because, you know, as teachers, we stand in front of our students every day, you know, and they're looking at us. We don't actually look any different on a webcam, and yet suddenly teachers become very self-conscious. And I did have teachers sort of wearing hats and dark glasses and things like that. So if students are feeling self-conscious, you know, tell them they can wear a hat or some dark glasses or some kind of disguise if they want to. You know, they don't have to be themselves every lesson. You know, they can come as a character if they want to. You know, so I think that's, you know, a very important part of what we do. One thing that's kind of linked to using the webcam and building empathy, I think, is and to understanding students, is building empathy. You know, and I think it's often we sort of take a lot of our students' problems on ourselves. You know, we think, oh well, that student wasn't engaged with the lesson, it must have been something I've done. But, you know, a lot of the time, I think if we think about, you know, what our students are going through, particularly at the moment, if they're in lockdown, maybe they know people who are sick, or have friends who are sick, or they've been sick, or they're in quarantine and they're worried about getting sick. You know, I think, you know, we could do more to think about, you know, what's impacting on our students as well. And I have a system for doing this called empathy mapping, and it's just this little map here and some questions, and you start sort of thinking about your students, thinking about the things that are impacting on them, and thinking about what we can do about that to help motivate them. I've written an article about this, about empathy mapping in the classroom and for teacher training as well. I'll just pass a link to this to you through the chat. It's there if you want to follow up on it. And you know, I think it's great. It's a good thing to do as a group of teachers as well, is to just sort of think about your students as a persona and sort of do an empathy map about the things that impact on them, you know, what they're afraid of, the things that motivate them, and to sort of try and get a bit closer to what they're experiencing when they're feeling unmotivated by this kind of environment. Anyway, that's just about the end of the time that I have for the session. I've got, if you want to ask questions, you can ask questions here. There's a QR code scan that you can scan here, which will enable you to feed in questions, or you can go to menti.com and put in that code, or I'll pass you a link to the questionnaire as well if you want to put them in the questionnaire. That way, if you share the questions this way, we'll all be able to see them, and you know, and I'll work through them together. We can work through them together and see each other's questions, and I'll try and answer some of those. I'll just give you a few minutes to sort of look at that and think of any questions that you want to ask, and you can put them into there. I'll give you a few minutes and I'll step out for that.
Thank you so much for that, Nick. That was great. We've got some questions, a few questions come through on the Q&A during the session.
Okay, great. I'll come back then.
Do you think, it's from Anand, do you think that the fact that parents are sometimes present in their kids' classes make them feel less engaged?
Quite possibly. You know, I think it's likely to be a distraction, especially if parents are butting in. And really, you know, if you were in the physical classroom with your students, you wouldn't want their parents there as well, and they probably wouldn't want their parents there as well. You know, I think one of the really important things that's often neglected in the remote classroom is giving students the time for socialization. You know, part of why students come to school, come to class, go to university is to meet other students and make friends and have time to chat. You know, and I think it's worth making, you know, a 10-minute space in each lesson for your students just to have a chat together, you know, maybe even without you there, you know, just make time for that. And probably if their parents are there, they're feeling that much less like being sociable, you know. So if you can get rid of the parents or ask the parents to leave and give the kids some space, then that would, I think that would really help in terms of rapport.
Mhm. Someone has asked about how to monitor students during the lesson. Um, how to do that when you're in a remote situation.
Yeah, monitoring students is a challenge, particularly because you want to get them into breakout rooms so that they can do some speaking practice together. Because, you know, if you're all in just one room like this, then there's not much chance to speaking. But it's challenging because then you've got to get round to each of those rooms to be able to monitor them. One of the things that you can do, though, and this is my favourite suggestion, is, you know, when you get students into groups, appoint one student as your monitor. So get that student to monitor the other students, give them the monitoring tasks so that they know what they're watching out for. And so at the end of the breakout session, when they come back, you know, they can tell you what was going on in their class and what was good and what was bad, or, you know, they can inform you about that. And so that the other students feel that somebody is watching them as well. You know, so, you know, appointing someone as a monitor for the breakout room so that they don't have an active task, just have a passive task, can be really helpful, I think. And it, you know, it may feel like that person is missing out, but actually monitoring and just listening to what other people are saying, you can learn a lot from that, and that can become, they'll be surprised how valuable being in that monitoring role is.
Mhm. Great. Someone said most students use their mobile phones for virtual classroom. What setup do you recommend for teachers in this situation?
That's a difficult one. You know, it really, often the teacher doesn't have a lot of choice about what platform they're using. You know, if you've got to use Zoom, you've got to use Zoom. I mean, I would discourage students from using their mobile phone for the lessons if they don't have to. You know, it's better if they can have a laptop. But, you know, what I do to sort of balance between the two is also have these QR codes and get them to use their mobile phone to do other stuff, maybe to do research while they're in the classroom. So I think if they've got a mobile phone, yes, use it, but try and get them onto a laptop for the main part of the lesson. You know, particularly if you're using presentation slides or materials, you know, their mobile phone screen probably isn't ideal for that. You know, but, you know, you have to, often we don't have a choice about these things, and we just have to work with what we've got. So do your
Mhm.
best. Good luck.
A couple of people have asked about different types of tools, so smart emojis and other signs, whether they're good and whether background, sort of Zoom backgrounds, are useful.
I tend to steer away from Zoom backgrounds because they can slow down your computer and take up more connectivity. But I'm lucky, you know, I've got a plain wall behind me, and that's totally distraction free. If you're in the position where, you know, you've got, you know, half of your life's goods behind you, then, you know, having a Zoom background might well help. Things like emojis, I think they're fine in chat. If you're doing text chat with your students, but, you know, and they're fine to put into your materials. But if you can keep the visual communication on the screen and on the webcam, you know, get them to use their faces to express happiness or sadness.
Great. And then someone asked quite a nice question actually is about the advantages of working from home. How can you sort of take advantage of being in a home environment?
Well, you know, I work from home most of the time and I love it, you know, and it's great to sort of, you know, spend more time with my family, spend less time commuting and trying to get around. So there are some big advantages. You know, what you need to do if you are working from home, though, is make sure you have a good setup. You know, in an ideal world, you know, if your school was asking you to work from home, they'd help you with this. You know, I have things like I've got a stand-up desk that goes up and down, so I can stand up some of the time and sit down some of the time. That really helps. You know, having my own kind of Bluetooth headset and things like that really help. But, you know, and having your equipment, but, you know, that's expensive to set up. But if you really want to sort of work from home all the time and become an independent teacher, you know, or then it's good to invest in those things, because they can help you do your work much better. You know, good lighting really helps as well in this kind of environment. If you're in the dark, you know, that can be a real obstacle for students if they can't see you properly.
No, I think I'm I think I'm not being a very good example of that right now. It's getting dark here in the UK.
Well, you're fine, actually. You stand out from your background. It's the worst thing. The worst thing ever is to have the light behind you and you become a silhouette, and you become like the anonymous person on the TV interview. You know, you're just this voice and a silhouette. That's the worst, really.
All these things we don't think about, eh? Do you want to go over to your Mentimeter now?
Yeah, I'll see if there's anything in it. There might not be. How can you deal with teenage middle school students who refuse to turn on their cameras? You know, I think, you know, the best way to deal with students who are refusing to turn on their cameras is you know, you make it part of the course. You know, give them activities that involve visual and make sure they're evaluated on them. And if, you know, students are very, you know, exam marks driven, and if it becomes part of their marks, you know, that they need to turn this on and they need to communicate with it, then that might help. But that is difficult, you know. What if students have distractions when online? How to deal with that? I mean, I guess the easiest way to deal with distractions is to be very engaging and make sure that they always have a task to do. But, you know, that is something that's going to happen. Students are going to get distracted from time to time. And, you know, it's worth remembering that actually it's quite tiring being in a remote classroom. It's quite tiring to teach remotely, and it's quite tiring to learn remotely. So think about giving them breaks when they're, you know, a couple of minutes break, you know, handle their distractions, come back to the class with a new topic. Tips on engaging adults in virtual classes. The same things really. Just sort of keep it visual, use the webcam as much as you can, make sure you're changing the activity quite regularly, you're getting them into breakout rooms, getting them to speak to each other and giving them feedback. Those are some of the key things, I think. Crowded classes, it's difficult to say what a crowded class is. You know, I tend to feel that for remote teaching, anything above 12 is quite a crowded class, whereas I know some teachers have to deal with, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40, or even up to 100. You know, that's really difficult. And, you know, the answer to it is breakout rooms, breakout rooms, breakout rooms, as much as you can. But it's not not going to be perfect. You know, you should be limiting class sizes to about 20, but that's really down to your school, I guess. How can I feel my students more confident during my online classes? You know, I think, you know, as long as you're not overcorrecting and you're being encouraging, you know, then students will start to speak eventually. You know, make sure you do plenty of speaking sessions, put them in breakout rooms where they're, you know, where they feel a bit less overlooked and maybe a bit less intimidated because you're not there correcting all the time. You know, that gives them some space to sort of make mistakes. And one of the things that a lot of teachers have said is that, you know, some of their shyer students seem much more confident in the remote classroom than they are in the physical classroom, and vice versa. So that's an interesting one. But, you know, practice, more speaking practice. Shy students are hard to get to speak. What ideas can help? Again, you know, maybe not always getting them to speak in class, get them to record themselves speaking. There are some nice tools that we can use like Vakaru, where students can record themselves speaking. They have time to think about what they're going to say then, and they can share it digitally online afterwards in maybe a link through chat. How can we improve reading and writing in online classes? Reading and writing is an interesting one, the reading. The writing, I think, is very interesting to do online. There are quite a lot of good tools like, you know, for example, Google documents where students can actually write collaboratively. So you can set them group tasks and to produce a text together. And I think that's really good. Reading, you know, I'm not really sure if the remote classroom is the place to do it. You know, give them plenty of reading homework, give them tasks to do. But, you know, I think writing is an interesting one to do online. And again, as I said, sort of things like Google Docs can make that collaborative. Yeah, tips for breaking anxiety: use the webcam, make it fun, play some of the games that I've suggested, get students to dress up, use puppets. All of those things can make it much more fun. Hybrid classes. This is an interesting one. I'm not really sure what hybrid classes is. This kind of hybrid teaching is a sort of, you know, a new entry into the ELT vocabulary. And, you know, I've heard different people talking about it, and it's been different things at different times. You know, some people are talking about hybrid learning as being when students come to the class some of the time and they have remote learning some of the time, which I see as being blended learning. You know, that's always been what blended learning is. Other people are saying it's when you have a class in front of you and you're teaching the class in front of you, and that you're teaching a class on Zoom at the same time. And personally, I think that's an awful thing. I don't think that's a hybrid at all. You know, that's, you know, teacher abuse or something like that, actually. You know, I can see why, you know, schools want to do it, if, you know, so that a teacher, a student doesn't miss out on a lesson if they're having to isolate. But, you know, I don't think it's really a hybrid learning. And, you know, I've not done it, and I would try. My best suggestion is avoid doing it. Crowded classes we've done. I think we've been through them all now. Yeah, that's it.
I've got a few more in the Q&A
Okay.
box. I'll just bring it
Yeah,
up.
if we have time, sure.
Some things about behavior. So Shaheen was asking about the puppet activity or the dressing up activity, the possibility that there might be a bit of a mischief maker in the class who can make it difficult to manage the class. So have you got any tips on how that can be handled?
I think there's, you know, whatever you do in the class, there's potential for mischief, especially in the online class. You know, if with younger learners, if you've got a, you know, that path to accountability, so that, you know, if students are misbehaving, you know, there's a route to discipline and to sort of contacting their parents about it. You know, that can help. But, you know, one of the best things is, you know, to make sure that it's not just fun, that it's also a learning experience, and there is an aim. So if you're using puppets, you know, you're using them to produce a conversation, you know, and they have a task to do with it. If you're getting them to dress up today, you know, okay, maybe you're basing a role play around that, and they're taking specific characters. They're going to be specific characters in that role play. You know, so make it part of your lesson. Make sure it's a learning activity, not just, okay, it's fun, we'll dress up today. You know, make it part of something.
Great. And then some people have been asking about online assessment or online testing. Have you got any suggestions for that?
I'm not really big on assessment. You know, I know there are lots of online tests and that students can take. Online testing can be very efficient. You know, I know that, you know, Cambridge probably has lots of online tests that students can take. British Council, I know, has the Aptis test that students can take online. You know, actually, online testing can be quite effective, you know, because it can cut down on a lot of teacher time, and, you know, you get lots and lots of data from it. The things that are difficult to test online are speaking. That's a bit more time consuming, but with AI, you know, that's becoming more possible as well. And I know, you know, Cambridge has a couple of really nice AI apps, one for writing and one for speaking, which will give students some instant feedback. I think one's called Improve Your Speaking, one's Improve Your Writing, and I don't have links for them handy, but they're really nice, and students can use themselves and get some evaluation back immediately. So those are good tools for that.
Lovely, thank you. I think that's just about all we've got time for.
Great.
So
Good.
thank you again, Nick. That's brilliant. Such a great session, and lots of really positive feedback in the comments. So thank you all for contributing.